Hello, my name's Jade and today I'm going to be discussing the books I read in January. I read 10 books total in January, 7 of which were novels, 2 were novellas, there was 1 graphic novel and 1 non-fiction. So a nice array. Let's get into it, shall we? Okay, 3 of them are from the same series, so I'm just going to talk about all of those here, and that is the Dark Olympus series by Katie Roberts. I read Neon Gods, Stone Hearts, I believe it's called, and Electric Idol, book 2. I audiobooked both Neon Gods and Electric Idol, both of which were narrated by Zara Hampton Brown and Alex Moorcock, and then Stone Hearts is like a little ebook novella extra thingy mabobber. Let's go in order. Let's start with Neon Gods, obviously. I really enjoyed it. I liked the Greek myth spin on it. If you didn't know, this series follows various mythological characters, but in a more like modern day kind of Olympus. It's more city-like. There's phones and technology and everything like that, and they're separate from humans. Characters, they're not the exact same as the old characters. For instance, Neon Gods follows Hades and Persephone, but Hades and Persephone are quite different from the archetypal characters that we already know. This version, Persephone is about to essentially be married off to Zeus, and she panics and she flees. She crosses this river that is forbidden to cross, essentially, unless you've been invited across. You're not supposed to cross it really, and into the lower city, what's known as the lower city, which she stumbles upon Hades, who isn't supposed to exist. He's supposed to, the old Hades has died, there's supposed to be no Hades, and she stumbles upon a very much existing Hades. And it's a romance, so romance sparks between them. It is a spicy book, and I really enjoyed it, especially the first 40%. It was so unique and novel, and there was something about it, it just got me, okay? I really liked the Greek myth spin, how it was very vague, it wasn't too intense, but it was very kind of reminiscent in a lot of ways. She definitely reinterprets it. I love that Hades is a woman, for instance. Kind of got a little repetitive, like a lot of the things I'd say and a lot of things I'd think about. It was very on the nose. It was very much like out and out telling us, like, I could feel the writer's hand telling us what we should think, how this is justified, and it started to grate on me a little bit. And the sex scenes as well, like, I just don't get it. Like, when they happen so often, I'm just like, okay, it's lost all, it didn't excite me anymore. I didn't care very much. And again, they kind of got a bit repetitive in my opinion, but I really enjoyed that first 40%. I really enjoyed the end section as well. That was really exciting, and on the whole it was an enjoyable experience. I read it really quickly. I was obsessed. I was addicted to it. Clearly I like the series enough to keep going on with it as well. I would give Neon Gods, I think, like a 6.5. I think it had potential to be more. It was the repetitiveness that really got me. And then we have Stone Hearts, which is a novella. In this one we follow, I'm trying to remember, Medusa and Calypso. Odysseus's, you know, side fling, which is the premise. Medusa's like a hit woman essentially for Athena, and she's sent to kill Calypso because Odysseus, Penelope's family, I don't know, they want her gone. And so Medusa's sent to kill her. I mean, it's a Katie Roberts romance novel, we can kind of gauge what's gonna happen. It's very short. It was ebook form, which I don't love ebooks. Just the way they're formatted, I never like them. It was, again, relatively addictive, relatively easy to read. There were some typos and some missing words in this one. I found I wish it was longer. It is quite short. I can't remember how long it is exactly now. I think it does kind of have that insta love trope, and I don't know if it was purposeful. It might have been purposeful, but I didn't love it. It was a lot. It was very info dumpy and very, like, again, telly, like she was straight up telling us stuff rather than showing us. I think if it's longer, all of that could have been fleshed out a little bit and it would have just been much stronger as a whole. It is what it is. It was fine. It was an enjoyable read, but I don't think I'm going to think about it very often. I'll probably give it like a 5 out of 10. Fine. And then lastly we have Electric Idol, which is, again, I audiobooked this one, same as I did the first one. The narrators are pretty decent. I really liked them. The only thing I'd say is that, like, we're following different characters in Electric Idol. We're following Psyche and why can I not remember anyone's names? Psyche and Eros. Obviously the same actors that did Persephone and Hades, so it takes a little adjusting to. I think I got there in the end though. I really liked the relationship in this one, and like the general pacing, the dynamic. Like there was a lot less sex scenes in this one, which I kind of liked. I don't think they were as hot as Neon God sex scenes per se. The thing with the plot is I was shouting at them a solution from the beginning. It took so long for me to understand why they didn't do that. There were just some more like obvious fixes, and they didn't explain why they weren't doing them for so long. They like jumped to this weird solution. So basically the premise is that, again, someone wants somebody to stone hearts. Eros has been sent to kill Psyche, and he doesn't want to kill Psyche. He kind of likes her. And so they decide instead they're gonna get married. And we go from there. Just couldn't understand why getting married? Why would them being married stop? Why would Aphrodite care? I just couldn't understand what was going on. The plot didn't make sense to me. I like the pacing and the structure of it. Why getting married? I just cannot like, why is that? I'd give Electric Idol a 6 out of 10 again. Enjoyable, addictive, few problems, fine overall. I will be reading the 3rd book in the series, and I probably will be reading more from this author in the future. I enjoyed them all, if nothing else. Next up, I read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. I've heard nothing but hype for this one. It's a cozy fantasy. We follow an orc who decides to give up adventuring to open a coffee shop. Quite a slow burn. Because it's cozy fantasy, like, it's never that intense. But it does give you all the warm, cozy, fuzzy feelings. I don't know what I just said. I audiobooked this one as well, and it's narrated by the author because Travis Baldry, I think he's an audiobook narrator. I think that's how he got into this industry, and he did a fantastic job. I really enjoyed his narration. Yeah, I don't have too much to say about it. It was really sweet. It gave me the warm fuzzies, escapism to its finest. Pretty quick read. It's not actually as long as it looks. Like, there's some bonus content in the end of this book. Definitely gonna read any more. I think he's bringing out like a companion, like a prequel maybe in this world, which I would definitely be interested in reading more from this author, more in this genre in general. Just a really solid, enjoyable experience. I'd give Legends and Lattes an 8 out of 10. Oh, also Thimblets is by far like probably my favorite character. I loved him. He's so cute. And there's a recipe to make thimblets in the back of this book, and I really want to make them. Next up, we have The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. I had read 2 of Emma's books in the past, Room and this one here that's been out of place, Stir Fry. Stir Fry was her debut, kind of less known I feel like than all of her other books. And Room, I mean, it turned into a film. It was pretty big. Everyone knows Room. And I've been wanting to read more for her since I read those 2 books. I really enjoyed both of them, and I'd love to read like everything she's written, to be honest. I'm really glad to have gotten to another one. This was turned into a Netflix film, which I'll talk about in a second. What I heard going into it, there's a little girl, she's like 11 I think, and she hasn't eaten for 4 months, and yet pretty good health considering she's not eaten for 4 months. It's impossible. She should be dead. And they send over an English nurse to observe what's going on, as well as a nun nurse. And it's a mystery. It's a very slow burn. There's lots of tiny little pieces that you pick up along the way, and things that you think are important but you don't know how yet, and it's not until later on that you kind of put them together. It's definitely character driven. The mystery kind of takes a backseat a lot of the time. There's a lot of themes about like superstition and like English versus Irish. She's completely, our main character, this nurse Lib, is completely an outsider. She doesn't understand them at all. So like the church and the power of the church, and there's a doctor in here and he's just all kinds of, he's something, I don't want to say what, but he's all kinds of, it's very interesting to watch out and incredibly thought-provoking. My note says it was addictive, it was well written, thought-provoking, emotionally charged, full of symbolism and metaphors and foreshadowing. My only complaint is that it got a tiny bit repetitive about the 3/4 mark. And like I instantly in the beginning knew that she was an outsider, but she started, when she kind of realised it, she kind of said it a lot. And there were 1 or 2 things that I was like wondering from the beginning, and it took her a while to wonder, and they're pretty big things. But both of those complaints I think are excusable. Like I don't think of them when I think of this book. I just think about how deep the characters are and how interesting the situation, how full of heart and meaning, and oh, I really loved it. I really loved this one. I flew through it. This cover as well, it's gorgeous. Give The Wonder a 9.5 out of 10. It came so close to being a 10. I just don't think it's quite there. I don't think I quite feel strongly enough about it, but it's so good. And then I watched the film. Watched it pretty soon after, like obviously within the same month, and I didn't like it as much. I didn't like the things they changed. I didn't understand why they changed them. Like I know, like I said, this is incredibly slow burn. Things happen really slowly. You have to be very patient. And you can't have that with a film as much because you've only got 2 hours. Things need to happen. There were just like certain things that were wildly different. Like the relationship between Lib and the newspaper man. What was happening? Why there was something she did to Anna that she would have never dreamed of doing in the book. Like it's explicitly said that she would never dream of doing it in the book. And the more the film went on, the more angry I got. Also, they were all really solemn and just like this the whole time. I don't understand why. Like they're so full of life in here. It felt like the meaning changed. Like what you would take away from the film I think would be relatively different from the book. I think there's still a few things that would be the same. I didn't like it. Next up, another great one is Women Talking by Miriam Towles. This is kind of based on a true story, but this is an imagined response. Between 2005 and 2009 in a remote Mennonite colony, over 100 girls and women were raped by what they thought were ghosts or demons. Their accounts were dismissed as wild female imagination. Women Talking is an imagined response to the real events. When the women learn the truth, they meet, secretly discuss how to protect themselves and their daughters from future harm. But they had just 2 days to decide before the rapists are bailed out and brought home. So all the men in the community have gone to bail out the rapists, and the women have like this little secret meeting to discuss what they're going to do. They have 3 options. Again, incredibly thought-provoking. The conversations and the topics in here, so many of them I'd already like had in my own brain. Like they just felt like they had just been pulled out of me. This kind of theme of women protecting themselves is something that I think about a lot for some reason, and I go on really deep kind of escapades in my mind about. It's written interestingly. We don't ever necessarily, like we do get direct speech. There's another book on this that I read this month that we just don't get direct speech. We do, but it's kind of in a Sally Rooney way where there's like no speech marks or anything, and it's written from a man's perspective, which I thought was interesting, and in the beginning kind of grated on me a little bit, but by the end I quite liked his character. It took a while to get used to the writing style for sure. It's very blunt. We're immediately thrown into, there's 8 women I think that are in this discussion, and we like just thrown in it, and it took me a while to realise who was who and where they stood and what family they came from, but you get there. It feels really terrifying at first, but it's not in the end. You get used to it. The atmosphere was palpable the whole time. The characters were so real and human and complicated, and he says it in the book. What is it? They're conflicting constantly. They're like contradicting themselves. They're real and they're human, and I love the premise of this. Like in the introduction, Women Talking is both a reaction through fiction of the true life events and an act of female imagination. I loved what it stood for. I love the conversations. I really don't have any criticisms. Again, I think a little bit like The Wonder, I don't know if I feel strongly enough about it for it to be a 10 out of 10. Maybe over time. For now I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10, which is so good. Cannot recommend it enough if it sounds interesting. This is also going to be turned into a film, so hopefully I have more luck with this adaptation than I did with The Wonder. Next up, I read Hex by Jenny Fagan. This is set during the witch trials in Scotland. It's part of like a Darklands series, I believe it's called, and they're looking at like Scottish history. It's about a person from the 21st century who goes back and visits a certain witch before they're like hung the next day. It's her last night alive in the jail. I cannot remember her name, but she was a real witch, and like her story is kind of a true story. I really like this idea. I can see the way that they could compare and contrast the way things were and the way things are now, and like what's changed and what hasn't changed. It's very poetically written. It's got incredibly powerful themes and ideas. I found them kind of hard to grasp at times, like these very lofty, again poetic, very imaginative, kind of made my interest ebb a little bit because it didn't feel concrete enough. Like I didn't really know what they were going on. Well, I did kind of know what they were going on about, but it was hard to relate to like my life and my experience. Like it all felt very grand, which normally I love, but I think there was just a lot of it. It was too much for me personally. I'm definitely glad I read it though, and I'm now gonna look more into this real life witch. God, just like the witch trials is so sad, and it is quite sad. This book, novella. This is a novella. I don't know if I said that. It's very short. Most of the books I read this month were quite short though. Anyway, I also read this in ebook form, and again there's some formatting stuff. I don't think that's necessarily like the author's or the publisher's fault. It just didn't translate well. I think maybe if it's a bit shorter, more condensed, it could have been more powerful, and like those grandiose themes and chunks could have been more sparing. It would have had a bigger impact on me personally. Overall, I'd give Hex, I think, a 6 out of 10. Next up is the non-fiction I read this month, which is Ancient Greece 101 by Christopher M. Belito. So I'm looking at my notes because I have no idea. This was such a whim read. Narrated by the author. Like it's more of like a series of lectures than it is a book necessarily, but it's on Audible, so I'm counting it. Start from like the Trojan War times and we end with Alexander the Great and like the rise of Rome. Incredibly big period of time. It's quite, you're jumping over a lot of themes, but he does cover a lot of the basics. I felt like it's somewhat newbie. Like, I know a lot about ancient Greece mythology, ancient Greece history. It's a bit touch and go. So I really enjoyed this to, if nothing else, get the basics. Feel like I have at least a structure now and I can go in and learn more about different specific periods of time. He was very amusing. He made sense the whole time. It was full of like other random little facts as well. I really enjoyed it. A lot of different stuff was covered. He looked at the philosophers and mythology and slavery and women and just a lot of different topics. Definitely, like, it feels like a beginner's guide. It feels like a really solid place to start. I'd give it an 8 out of 10 just because it like wasn't mind-blowing, but I don't have any criticisms. Next up we have The Sandman Volume 1, Preludes and Nocturnes, illustrated by Sam Keith, Mike Dridgenber, Malcolm Jones III, and of course written by Neil Gaiman. This was turned into a TV show last summer, and I started reading it last August with the intention of watching the show. I got halfway through by December. I found it really, really dense. I think it's due to the art style, mostly. Like, it's quite chaotic, and all of the pages are pretty densely packed. As far as graphic novels go, it's a bigger volume. I really like the world. I think there's a lot of potential. I like the characters, very intriguing, but I struggled through it is the problem. The writing could be quite on the nose sometimes, and again, it is a graphic novel, so I can kind of see why. It almost had this like fairy tale-esque quality at times, which is really nice. I don't know how to feel about it overall. It has huge potential. I was really intrigued. I definitely enjoyed it at times, but at times I struggled through. It wasn't necessarily when I was reading it I was struggling. I couldn't bring myself to read it, to pick it up. So yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely going to continue on. I'm intrigued. I'm hoping I like the other ones better, because this is a wildly popular series. It's like one of the greatest of all times. It's 30 years old now. So I'm hoping I like it. I don't know. I think I'd give it a 6 out of 10 though. I'm pretty on the fence. I think it has more strengths than weaknesses. I don't know. I just struggled. That's all I can say. I struggled through it. I really love this cover as well. I think it's gorgeous. And then the last book that I finished this month, I'm currently reading one, and I will finish it by the end of the month, so hopefully I can film a clip when I've actually finished it. For now, the last book that I finished so far, Matrix by Lauren Groff. I've heard nothing but hype about it, even on the cover. Madeline Miller says it's a lush, gripping, ferocious and animated, sensual detail on every page. Sarah Walters calls it an audacious piece of storytelling full of passion, wisdom and magic. Emma Donoghue says thrilling, vivid, adventurous story about women in power that will blow readers' minds, left me grasping. I've kind of had a theme of like women against power structures this month. I don't know if you can tell. Follow, like, I think she's 16-year-old Marie. She's from France, but she's in England. It's during like the time of Queen Eleanor. She personally loves Queen Eleanor. She's like a half sister by marriage to Queen Eleanor. Queen Eleanor sends her away to basically be in charge of a nunnery. And it's about what she does to this nunnery, essentially. I don't want to say too much. Objectively, it's got a lot going for it. Objectively, I should have loved it. Everyone loves it. Writing is seemingly very historically accurate. Like I said, half the time I didn't know what was going on. There's a lot of Googling. It's very beautiful at times, very detailed. In the beginning, I didn't find it. I felt very disconnected from both the characters and the setting, but as the story went on, I changed my mind. I did kind of connect to the people in the setting more. I got used to the writing style. Written like retrospectively, as if everything's been retold. And so the plot overall, I can never fully connect to. Like, I still felt like I was being held at distance. Premise is wild and interesting. Characters are layered and distinct. The symbolism comes full circle, which I love, and there's a lot of like cool little ideas in here, cool little seeds of ideas. But like I said, I felt at distance from it the whole time. I couldn't really connect to the plot. We kind of skip time periods a lot. There's no direct speech whatsoever. That's kind of what I mean when I'm saying it almost feels like it's retold. It's very much felt like there was a lens over the top of it. I didn't care. I didn't understand the point. I didn't know what I was supposed to get out of it overall. It might, with time, settle and I might like it better. I don't know. I'm confused. I'm confused with this one as well. I don't know how to feel about it. Objectively, I should love it, but I didn't for whatever reason. I think I'd give it like a 7 out of 10. I think I have too many strengths for me to give anything lower, but I just personally didn't connect to it. I didn't love it. I'm hoping over time it will resonate and my opinion will change. God, what a bummer. I really hoped I'd like it. I love the cover as well. It's gorgeous. Okay, since we have spoken last, I have finished my last book of the month, book number 11, and that is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, translated by Roz Schwartz. This was actually originally written in French. even though the author was from Belgium. I audiobooked this one. I cannot check for you who it was narrated by because I'm talking to you right now, so I can't access who narrated this. But they did a fantastic job. I loved her narration. She had like a really soothing tone. I Have Never Known Men is about a group of women that are in a cage, locked up, and they don't know why, they don't really know how long they've been there, and our narrator is the only child that was in this cage, the only little girl, and she's kind of grown up, and it starts when she's kind of getting to the age where she's really wanting answers, she was wanting to question things, she's starting to become a lot more self-aware. I don't want to say too much, even though the beginning kind of does give somewhat away where the story is going to end up. You have a rough idea because of the clues she gives you in the beginning. It's quite mysterious, it's quite a slow burn. I think it's definitely one of those where it's more about the journey you go on rather than this big epic plot per se. There's an afterword by Sophie McIntosh, and in the English version it's an introduction, which is how I listened to it. I listened to it via an English audiobook. And I'm going backwards and forwards as to whether I prefer it as an afterword or as an introduction. I think it makes more sense as an afterward. Whenever they like start going into any kind of plot detail in an introduction, I'm just like, this is spoilers, I don't want to know. So I think theoretically it makes more sense as an afterword, but because I had a lot of what she said, Sophie McIntosh, in mind going through the book, I could see how if you didn't have that in mind you might be disappointed by it. But then, like I said, there's hints at the end in the beginning anyway, so I don't think the afterward / introduction gives much more than that away necessarily. I kind of wish I hadn't read it until after the book, like this American edition has it in, which I love this cover, by the way. This is one of those books where it's like, what's the meaning of humanity? That's the biggest, like, it's full of questions, and these women obviously are in a very strange situation, and their journey's, you know, very unlike ours in our modern day life. They've been stripped of everything essentially. They're constantly talking about what makes them human and how humiliating these things are, and like every time they said that, it kind of surprised me a bit, because why would you care about being humiliated at this point? Surely survival is key, but then that's what makes us human. We care about these things. It's full of questions. It's very short, it's a very easy read. I underlined quite a lot of it because I found quite a lot of it very thought-provoking. Very well written. The Sophie McIntosh compares it to water. She compares the prose to cool water, and I completely agree. It's very simply written. It's almost a bit repetitive, but I think that's purposeful, because if there's nothing going on in your lives, you would be repeating yourself all the time, because there's anything that you can think about, you will do, because that's all you have to think about. I just think it was so clever. I think it should be taught in schools. It's one of those. It's kind of like a dystopian, maybe sci-fi. We don't really know what's going on. If you like books with that kind of theme, with the kind of theme of like what is humanity, I recommend it. I would give it a 9 out of 10, I think. I really enjoyed this one. And those are all the books that I read in January. Please let me know down below what your favourite book you read in January was. If you've read any of these and you have any opinions, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to chat about it. But other than that, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a super morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye! I really struggled my way through that one.